a 5 round. It's gonna be fun. A
Mhm.
5 round draft where Greg and I are going to draft the five. It'll be 10 because five each. The 10 worst contracts in the NBA right now, currently in the in the league. So since Greg, you are the guest with the first pick in the earnestly speaking worst contract draft for 2025, who are you taking and why?
Thanks for making this easy for me. So I have a couple of people on my list, and I was actually debating between two of them, but I had to go with Embiid at number one, only because he just signed a max extension, and there's a non-zero chance that he never plays basketball again. I mean, like
Yeah,
they're not saying that it's a good chance. I mean, odds are he'll be back next year in some shape or form. He'll rehab over the summer, and I'm sure he'll get some treatment, maybe the same kind of treatment that Kobe got. Go to Europe and get some sort of treatment. I have no idea, but I mean, there's at least the possibility that a guy who's on the wrong side of 30, who has no meniscus in his knees, I mean, who just re-inked a deal that's going to keep him with the Sixers until his mid 30s. Like, if it turns out that he can't play or is totally diminished, that's an like you can't move that contract. There's no amount of picks that you could send out to move that contract in the next couple of years. So, given his injury history, the condition of his knees, the fact that it's not like he's in the middle of this contract, like he just started it, like he just re-signed over the summer.
yeah.
So, given that, I would say Embiid right now.
Well, for
For
the
me,
record,
number one.
if I had a first pick, I would pick Embiid too, also because he leapfrogged the guy who I'm going to pick right now in a second. But yeah, the fact he's owed 50 something, and then 69 on the player opt, which at this rate, the way things are going, we've been discussing on the podcast for the last couple of weeks that he's going to opt in that deal. Um, he's falling apart. It's crazy. It's frustrating because with Embiid is like when he plays, he's immediately impactful. He doesn't play bad. He hardly has any bad games, honestly. Like the 1 or 2 games he played before he got hurt again, he had a triple double first game back.
Yeah.
Triple double, 3 point triple double.
Yeah, I think this season though, like the last game he played was against the Nets, and he was 4 of 13, and they actually
Yeah,
didn't play in the fourth quarter, and they were down
right.
by like 18 points in the third, and it wasn't until they pulled in that Philly came back and tied the game. So I mean, you could see that he was laboring and not himself, and given Philly's situation, not going anywhere without him, having a top six protected pick in a draft, a loaded draft. It made sense to shut him down from a number of standpoints, but I mean, I don't know health wise what his future is, and I don't think he knows what it is either. I mean, he came out and said, I mean, like there was a report during one of the games that was news to everybody watching. I believe it was against the Pacers. I could be wrong though, but that he would probably need another knee surgery after the season. And it's like, we don't know that he needs another knee surgery because it's not like repairing a meniscus or repairing an ACL. Like, that's not the issue. So, I mean, like the fact that they don't know what the treatment is today, uh, and he just started the contract, I think that uncertainty plus the bad contract plus his age, uh, that all adds up for me to a number one pick in this draft.
I also think his play style too also is to help him because he's actually flop around and fall on the floor all the time.
Yeah.
That's not helpful either.
No, 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 and I think he sold it years ago as, like, he did that because he thought that, like, it would prevent injury, but it was almost like he was willing to
No.
go to the floor and he could control it, but it's like he kinda plays, like, recklessly. It's like a Gerald Wallace type of style of play, and, like, Gerald Wallace, like, overnight became an old man because
Oh yeah, remember that? He was an
that
all
style.
star one year, and then like within 2 years, like out of the league.
Yeah, yeah, because I mean that style, like, it grinds on you, and I mean in Embiid's case, I mean you can see the damage that his body has taken, and I mean it's not like he's 60 years old. I mean he's like 30, 31. I mean it's not
Yeah.
like he's ancient, but yeah, I just don't know where they go from here with that contract if he's not able to play, or if he is and he's drastically diminished when he comes back.
Right. So the guy that Embiid leapfrogged in the last month or so is, of course, you know it's Bradley Beal. Obviously, he's one of two players right now with no. The reason why is the worst contract in the league next to Embiid it's not because of the money. It's a no trade clause.
Yeah.
He has all the control, and there's only two guys in the league who have a no trade clause. It's LeBron James, who obviously has earned that right to have that, even at 40 years old, and then Bradley Beal. What are we doing? Um, And then and the thing is too also he dictates where he wants to go. Look, he's still a good age range. He's only 31 years old. He's 31 now currently. So he's getting 50 million this year. He'll get 53 next year, and then there's a player op in 26-27 for $57 million. He is a productive player. Let's be clear about that. He's still a good player. I think he's averaging 18, 19 a game right now in Phoenix.
Yeah, he had 25 in their last game. So
he is productive.
Yeah, and so above 50% shooting, like he was the one that I was struggling with between him and Embiid. But same reason as you, he can still produce. Like I know that he's going to play. Like even if he averages 17 points in a reduced role, I know he's going to be on the floor. I don't know Embiid's going to be on the floor.
You think Phoenix regretting trading for him?
Oh yeah, totally. Because I mean, like they're probably going to go into like a crash course rebuild this summer, maybe, because that they're trading Durant. We talked about that, and
that's going to that is absolutely going to happen. I'm telling you right now.
Yes,
100%.
But then my question is, what happens with Booker? Does Booker then?
That's a big question.
So they trade Durant, and I mean, it probably behooves the Suns to trade Durant, trade Booker, get 7 or 8 picks back, and then like your cupboard is loaded again and rebuild the way a lot of these other teams have. So I mean, like they're going to be at a crossroads. But the reason why I'm bringing all this up is because it was all precipitated by Bradley Beal's no trade clause. Because like, look, they had dug themselves a deep hole, but the way that they were going to try and dig themselves out of it was moving Bradley Beal before the trade deadline and either getting back, Jimmy Butler was the guy they wanted, not saying they were going to, but like they couldn't even get off the ground basically because he wasn't going to approve any of those deals.
Yeah, I told you like the Heat were interested before he got moved to Phoenix a couple years ago. Yeah. They liked him. Pat Riley liked him. I'll take him, but I don't want that no trade clause.
Yeah.
And the same thing too. Also, the reason why Bradley Beal was not ever even moved because we don't want that no trade clause. That's simple. And the numbers, because the money by virtue of where the contracts are going right now, it's not horrendous. It's not horrendous in comparison. Given his, if Bradley Beal can stay healthy, this is actually a decent contract. Is that no trade clause that kills him?
It's not horrendous if you can trade him, and the no trade clause is why it's one of the worst deals.
Exactly. So that's why it's the worst deal. It's the second worst deal, according to us, anyway. All right, who's your third pick for the worst contract in the NBA?
Yeah, so I mean, originally I wasn't going to go with this guy, but then when I looked at all the other contracts, I'm like, I can make an argument that this is worse than all those deals for a number of reasons. So I'm going back to Philly and going with Paul George.
That's easy. That's easy. We've been saying all along that Paul George, the Sixers might have 2 or 3 worst contracts in basketball, and you already picked them both.
Yeah, and I mean, he's going to be 35 in May, so that's obviously a problem. They just signed him to a 4-year, $220 million deal. So I mean, he's still got 3 years left on that deal. It's a problem. I think the bigger problem is watching him play. So, I mean, at least in Bradley Beal's case, he looks like he's giving you effort. The concern with Paul George was that not only the exodus from the Clippers because they wouldn't give him his money, but then he goes to the Sixers. I don't even think wanting to go to the Sixers, but it was only a money grab. And then as soon as things took a downturn and Embiid got hurt, wasn't playing well, the team gets banged up. They're an old team. You have Lowry and Gordon and guys like that aren't playing well. He looked like he checked out, like totally. And I know that people will say like, oh, he's got a finger injury. And we've talked about this before. That doesn't affect his defense. I mean, he was getting blown by left and right by guys who are borderline NBA players. And to me, that's a sign of a guy who's quitting. And for the money that they owe him to not get a full effort would be concerning for me that here's a guy who just went for a money grab and he's not concerned with winning at all. So, I mean, it's not that he won't be able to play next year and give them good minutes. It's just that I don't know that he has a desire to if Philly's not going to be a good team. And then how do you then offload that contract? Much like Embiid, you don't, unless you're willing to throw in multiple first-round picks to move it. And then that at that point, that is counterproductive to what you're trying to do in terms of going forward and probably rebuilding. So I think that for me, that was an easy one, especially when I started comparing some of the other guys lower on the list.
I mentioned the age. I think the age has hurts him more than anything else. The age, he's what, 33, 34?
He's 34. He's going to be 35 in May.
With 3 more years to go.
Yeah.
Which means he'll be 38 probably when the player opts into play.
Yeah. Yeah.
What I warn Sixers fans, like, it's not that I don't like Paul George, but you better hit on this in the first 2 years. And year 1 already exhausted. And the problem is to also, it's not just Paul George, it's Paul George and what everything has to work also around that is Embiid, and that has not played out well. So, all right, fourth pick in the draft. You know what? Give me Jordan Poole out of Washington. Now you look at the numbers, say, oh, it's not a terrible contract, comparable to other guys, but he's not those other guys. He's not as good as a Jalen Brown and a Bradley Beal, those guys. Jordan Poole is not a $30 million player. I'm sorry, he's just not. Okay. And I at this point too, also he has 26 coming this year, obviously. 31.8 next year, and then 34 the year after before he's a free agent at 20 years old. The age here is good, but he's not someone when you consider, obviously his inconsistent play and his attitude on top of that too. Also, I don't think teams are like clamoring to add this guy to the roster. I don't even think even in 26, 27, teams that might need a shooter like him or a scorer are clamoring to get this guy, because I don't think he adds a positive to your culture. As much shit we give Draymond Green for the handling of that situation in Golden State, Draymond may have had a point to some degree about reacting the way he did, because Jordan Poole was seen he's just kind of aloof when it comes to stuff, and he put him on a bad team, especially now. It's like it shows even worse on a bad team. If he couldn't keep together on a great team and Golden State has won a title, he's not going to do it on a bad team in Washington. So you have all that. Washington's going to be stuck with that guy to the end, honestly. So Jordan Poole for me is my fourth pick.
Yeah, that's a good selection. I mean, if you look at his numbers, they're not terrible. If you look at the contract, it's not terrible. But I mean, when I used to cover the Nets, and I would go into the locker room my first year doing it way back in 2009, I used to talk to Chris Douglas Roberts, and he got all bummed out after all these losses. And I mean, he told me one time, he's like, nobody cares what you do on a losing team. At least I don't. Like, basically, like, no one cares what your stats are on a bad team. And so Jordan Poole can have games where he scores 30 or 35 points, but he's not a good defensive player. He doesn't fit into a winning style of basketball. Like, he can put up great numbers occasionally, but that doesn't make him a good player or a team that or a player that other teams would want or other good teams would want. So I don't see them being able to trade that deal. I would say for Washington, the only benefit for them is that, like, they're in the midst of like a tear down rebuild. So, like, it's not like he's preventing them from winning something anyway. If anything, he's probably helping them accomplish their goals long term in terms of they're going to get a top 5 pick this year. They're probably going to be in line to get a top 5 pick next year. And so it's like you could say, okay, in 4 years, they might be on the upswing. But by that point in time, his contract will be over. So, I mean, like, they'll be, when they're looking to be competitive again, his contract will no longer be an issue. So, I mean, I think, maybe he's helping them accomplish that in terms of them being bad. But I don't see any good team ever biting or giving them any sort of asset for even a second round pick and salary to take that deal on. So I think and they might be fine being stuck with that contract for the next couple of years while they're tanking. So
he's as you said, he's helping their the situation. So yeah. All right, who's your fifth pick in the draft?
So there are a bunch of players on my list. I have Jeremy Grant at number 4.
I like that one.
Only because, I mean, he signed a 5-year, $160 million deal the same summer that Damian Lillard was, those trade sweepstakes were going on, and we thought that Dame was going to go to Miami. And I mean, you're looking at it and you're like, okay, here's a guy who's past 30, who's making, $30 to $35 million a year, who really hasn't played much this year. And like, is another team going to trade for him to be like their third best player? Like, if you're trading for him to be your third best player, I don't see you competing for a championship. So I don't know, like, prior to the season, like, Detroit made some sense because it's like, okay, you have Cade Cunningham, you have a bunch of young guys. Like, they wound up going to Tobias Harris.
He may fit now. He may fit that team now, given where that team's at currently.
Yeah. But I mean, again, you're putting him in there to be like, your fourth guy, and they're probably not a title contender anyway. But I mean, that's just a tough deal to move given his age and the fact that, like, he really hasn't been available this year. And
how old is he now?
Let me look up to confirm. I want to say he's like 30 or 31.
Wow, a little older than I thought. I think maybe like late 20s.
Let me see. He is okay. So he's 31. He was born in 90.
Wow, he's older than I thought.
Yeah. Yeah.
That dude's stealing money, brother.
Yeah. So I mean, at 31 years old, and having like a banged up year, making that kind of money. And I mean, look, there are other guys not only on my list, but just in the league that are like in that same ballpark where like they're past 30, they're under contract for another, 2, 3, 4 years, whatever it is, making that kind of money. Like it's a tough sell. And like guys at that age, like there's not really a big demand to trade for them. So like I don't know what Portland would get. And like they have a good thing going on in Portland. Like they've definitely gotten a lot better.
They're playing good basketball, man.
Yeah, they're playing great. So I mean, like he doesn't really fit in like what they're doing. Like if I were them, I'd rather just play Tumani Kamara and not have him, and have him be my wing defender as opposed to like having Jeremy Grant taking like 15 shots a game. And I don't know. I just don't see a future for him on that team or on like a really good team.
Is he a tradable? Is it those numbers? I know he got an extension this past year. Is it remotely tradable?
I mean, only if you're trading him for another bad contract.
So I mean, he's getting like $30 million a year, currently around there.
Yeah. So I mean, he's probably in like the 33, 30, 32. I mean, I don't have the exact.
That's a lot of money for a guy like that. Who's not really a big plus in your team. Wow, that's
but terrible. I mean, 5 years for 160. I mean, that's over 30 million a year. So I mean, that's Lord.
And the thing is, though, the CBA, you have to pay 9% of the floor.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. This is when people say, "Well, he's on this contract," because teams have to pay. There's not enough good players to pay. So you'll see guys take up cap room, take up roster because they need to pay to get to the floor above the threshold. So
yeah, but the only thing they could get in return for him would be like another player on a similar contract where you're swapping one problem for another.
Yeah. So yeah. All right. So my pick goes here. This is right. Yeah. My pick is number 6, right? Number 6 pick in the draft. Taking future Hall of Famer Kawhi Leonard. He's like Embiid. When he plays, he's the top 5% player in the league, without question. But again, when he plays, just signed an extension last year, and we know why he did that. They did that because of the new arena, which I get it, but I don't. So you're paying that guy 3-year extension at 150. He's getting 49 this year, 492 this year, 50 million next year at age 34. And at age 35 in his last year of his deal is getting 50 million again. I mean, it's bad because he's really good when he's on the court, but it's so far and few now at this point, and especially when he's healthy during the year and he's not healthy in the playoffs, it's a bad timing. I mean, this is pretty self-explanatory at this point. Like, I get what the Clippers are doing, and I honestly, by the way, I do praise him for having the foresight to letting Paul George walk, because if they had both Paul George and Kawhi on this again, taking a chance on those two guys again to stay healthy, and with that mark, at least they have one guy is in on a lineup. Having two guys in on a lineup, that's a big issue. At least have James Harden there to hold the fort down. So Kawhi is my sixth pick for his contract.
Yeah, I mean, I know what they were doing, but as I argued in my book, like going after old and injury-prone players to basically fill out a new arena, which is exactly what the Nets did, is not going to bring you closer to a title. So, I mean, yes, that's going to help you fill some seats, but where the Clippers are right now is like smack dab in the middle, which is like the worst place to be. Like, they've got older players. They're just good enough to not have a good draft pick, but they're, not good enough to be competing for a title. And they don't even have their draft picks. So, I mean, like, they're kind of in a no man's land where it's not like they can say, like, oh, we'll tank. Like, we talk about the Miami Heat all the time. It's like, well, the Heat could pivot into a tank for the rest of the season, whether they're trying to or not. But, like, they'll still have their pick. So they could wind up winning the lottery and getting Cooper Flagg, whereas like the Clippers
don't. Can you imagine?
Yeah, but like I'm just saying, like the Clippers don't have that luxury. Maybe Miami jumps up the way Atlanta did. I wouldn't bet on that, and I doubt it would happen. But they at least have that luxury of it possibly happening. Like the Clippers don't have that luxury, so the Clippers are in a state where you have Harden who's old, you have Kawhi who's old and injury prone. You don't have your draft picks. If you were to sell these guys off, you're not getting your draft picks back. So then you're going to be at the mercy of some other team being poor, which isn't likely. And you're doing that all in the name of selling tickets at a new arena. And I get that, but I mean, like, you're just kicking the can down the road for when you're eventually going to have to go into a rebuild.
Well, I think their thing is, oh, we'll make the money back in ticket sales, fresh in the arena. So I get that. I get the business aspect, but
Yes.
from
Yeah.
a basketball perspective, terrible.
Yeah,
Terrible.
and when I wrote my book, it was all about, like, from a basketball perspective. It's like, what is going to make this team a title contender? These are not the things that you want to do. And ultimately, like, for the Nets, for the Clippers, like, when you're the second tenant in town, basically, I feel like having a sustainable model of success is the best way to do it. And right now, I would argue that the Clippers don't have that because they just have two older players and they're not part of the long-term solution. Like, I don't see this team being capable of winning a title. And I also don't see how they would go out and acquire players that would help them win a title. So they're kind of like stuck with these guys, which is good for ticket sales, but not good for winning a championship.
And by the way, approaching mid-30s also. So the
Oh
age
yeah,
is
totally.
help his
And injured all the time. So I mean, like, that, he was on my list too. So I mean, that's
right. All right, 7th pick for you, Greg.
Okay, so I'm deciding between two guys here. I mean, I guess I'll be able to include both of them. So I stayed in Portland and went with DeAndre Ayton.
Yeah, he's on my list also too.
Not that he's old. He's only 26. Not that
He looks old.
Well, and that's the issue. I mean, like, the issue when I watch him play is that I don't see a guy who looks like he wants to play. I mean, I see a guy who looks like Ben Simmons, quite frankly.
Checked out.
Yeah, he just looks checked out. I mean, he looks like a guy who's there collecting checks. He's poor on the glass. I mean, Channing Frye and a whole bunch of other guys have, like, killed him this year when you see some of their highlights. And he's been injured a lot in that lineup. And to be honest, just because they say he's injured doesn't mean he actually is. They might just not want him in the lineup. So, I mean, like, that could just be like, we'll keep paying you, but we'd rather start Donovan Kling in injury. That's what that could be. And again, his salary and age is not something that's, like, totally out of control. It's not like he's making $60 million a year. But the issue is, like, you have a guy who's under contract for 2 years who doesn't look like he has any interest in playing basketball. And so I don't know how. So you don't move that contract because who's taking that deal?
Yeah, he was unhappy in Phoenix. He's unhappy in Portland, which means you're just unhappy.
Yeah.
This is who you are. I mean, this is what it is. All right, 8th pick. This might shock you and some and our listeners here, but follow along with me. I picked Jamal Murray for the Nuggets. Still a good player, great player, in fact. However, injury prone, and just started the extension on his deal, if not last year. He's getting $46 million this year, $50 million next year. No, I'm sorry. This year is getting 46. Next year, 46 million. The year after, 50 million. Then in 27, 28, 53 million, and then in 2029, at 31 years old, he'll be getting $57 million before he's free agent. And I say this I hate saying it because he's won the finals less than 2 years ago. Him and Jokic are a great tandem, but he's being paid like a player that is a elite top 10 guy, top 15 guy, and yet the production is not as such. And if Jokic for some reason gets hurt or things happen too, and the team continues to disintegrate in this couple of years, that contract is going to look worse, especially if he starts getting hurt a lot, which he does get hurt a lot for record. He's a good player. He's a really good player. He had a great run the 1 year when he stayed healthy, and him and Jokic won a championship. But the more I watch Denver, and I watch OKC, and we mentioned OKC in the top of the show, the more I watch both those two teams, it's saying both those teams are going in opposite directions right now. Like, Denver's still really good, but I'm not sold on them beating OKC in the 7-game series. And Jamal Murray, he kind of looks old out there a little bit. I'm not going to lie to you. When I watch him against the Thunder, he looks old out there.
Yeah, there's a couple things here. I mean, I feel like they were backed into a corner and giving him that deal because Murray runs the 2-man game with Jokic, and if you don't have Murray, it's like, well, then Jokic isn't going to be happy because then he doesn't have, like, another star level player who's going to complement his game. Murray on his own, like, if you took Jokic out of the equation, you're right, it's not a good deal at all. But I feel like they sort of had to do that. And
of course,
the second part of my argument is sort of like a nod to Dallas in terms of, like, they were willing to move away from Luka because they didn't want to give him that money. Like, can Denver ever be in a situation like where they're like, we'll pay you $175 million, but we're not giving you the max? And is there another place out there that would have given him more money? It kind of like, or forget Dallas, like what the Clippers did with Paul George. Like, we'll give you a deal.
There's always a place, Greg. You know this. There's always a place they'll do that. Trust me.
But I mean, this summer, the only team that's got considerable cap space is Brooklyn. And I don't know that they'd be, lining up to give Jamal Murray like $50 million a year and like a
They might have 2 years ago after the finals.
Yeah, maybe. But I don't know. I guess in this new like
second apron.
The second apron, the first apron,
that's what's different now.
Second apron. You have Michael Porter Jr. getting max money. You have Jamal Murray getting max money. It's like that's your core. And it's like I don't know that because of that, they have enough room to wiggle around it to then add to that core. So, I mean, because of that, I feel like they're just kind of stuck because of those two deals. I get why they gave it to him, but you're right. It's not a good deal because if you were to just stick him on Washington, let's say, it's not like he would be like an all-star level player. So he's a great player with Jokic, but I don't know that he would be a great player if you put him in another scenario where he had to be like the lead guy.
Right. Yeah, I agree. All right, 9th pick for you, buddy.
Okay, so for my last pick, this one I guess might be a little bit of a surprise, but I went with Jrue Holiday.
Wow, Jrue Holiday.
Who probably wouldn't be on the radar for most people. Like I had Zach LaVine on the list, but I'm like, he's still playing well. But like Jrue Holiday's 34 now. He just got signed to an extension. He's going to be making $34 million at age 37. And he's already missed like a fair amount of time this year. And like, he's basically like their fifth guy. I mean, he's not, the criticism was when Milwaukee traded him for Dame, it's like, oh, how could you take away this great defensive player and so on and so forth. And it's like the reason why they did that is because like he's not a guy who's going to go out and get you 20 points a game. Like he's basically a defensive specialist at this point. And for me at that age and being a defensive specialist, like it works fine with the Celtics because there's a pecking order there and he's perfectly content and he fits in well in that pecking order being at the bottom. But I'm looking at a guy who, like, if he were still in Milwaukee, he'd be averaging like 14, 15 points a game, playing great defense. But
and not only that, on a team that's getting older and older and older. Now, granted, they moved Middleton for Kuzma, that helps a little bit, but at the same time, they I don't think Milwaukee is going to challenge Boston or even Cleveland this year at this point in the playoffs. And Jrue Holiday, I don't think is going to change that dynamic because of the age and the injuries.
Yeah. Like had he been there, that would not like. I think that Milwaukee is a better team or would be a better team with Dame there right now than if they had Holiday because they just wouldn't have enough scoring on the floor. They wouldn't have enough scoring to complement.
To trade one for the other, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, like the contract isn't bad in the sense that like by itself it's bad. But like on the Celtics, it's fine because he's not being asked to do all that much because Tatum and Brown are doing the heavy lifting. Derek White will do a lot of heavy lifting. I mean, heck, Peyton Pritchard will do like more heavy lifting than Jrue Holiday will be asked to do. So I mean, like he's not asked to score, so he fits in well in that dynamic. But he's not really a great shooter. No. He's 34 years old. He's signed until 37. Like, I don't know. Anytime you get a player who's in his mid-30s making, mid-30s, $30 million money, like, that's a tough deal.
I think Boston, what they did also, and you see, if you look at the contracts of Tatum, contracts of Brown, contracts of White, they all signed within a year of each other. And Jrue Holiday, too, especially his extension. They made a calculation. Okay, this is going to be our core for the next 3 to 4 years. Mm-hmm. We're locking in this core. This is it. So wherever how many titles to get out of this, we'll see how they got one already, possibly another one on the horizon. Who knows? Because he'll be in 27, 28. He'll be 37 years old. With a player option. We have to assume at 37-2, he's opting in that contract.
Yeah,
we have to assume he's gonna do that. Okay, because he's not gonna be a $37 million player. Hell, he's not a $30 million player now. Probably we probably agree to that. But the Celtics made a calculation. We're gonna lock in this score. They won the title. We're not going to score, and how far his score goes. I mean, do they trade Jrue Holiday at some point down the road? I don't know if a $34 million guy is going to be enticing for teams, with multiple years on his contract. Probably not. This is it for him, pretty much, unless he retires. So yeah, I actually agree with that. Actually, I didn't have my list, but looking at this thing now, as you mentioned it, I actually agree with you on this.
Yeah, and it's similar to the Jamal Murray thing. It's like
Yes.
in that system, he works fine, so it's not terrible. But if you just isolate the player and the contract, it doesn't look great. And in terms of moving him, like the only way you're moving him is in the same way that Milwaukee moves Chris Middleton, and then you're having to use assets, future picks, possible young players to get off that deal to then get someone else for him in the middle of that deal. So it's not like it's immovable. It's just that like you're going to have to give up valuable assets at some point. Maybe that's a 2031 first round pick or something like that, down the line to get off of his deal. So, I mean, it's not like it's a deal that other teams would want unless they're getting compensated for it.
Right. The only difference between him and Murray is that he's a little bit older. So,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, to your point. All right. Last pick for me. I actually was going to I had one guy in mind I was going to go take, but I started doing a little more research as we're talking. I was going to take Terry Rozier, actually, in Miami, but he has 1 year in his deal next year. And I still think that $27 million could be tradable-ish because of, final year's contracts. Like, if you can move Kyle Lowry at $3 million like last year, you can move Terry Rozier next year. So Miami, that's why I pivoted off the Rozier thing. But he's been terrible for the Heat this year. So I decided to go. Another guy I considered doing also too. Must surprise you, Damian Lillard. I consider that one also too. But he's having a great year.
Yeah.
And what he does well, you see with Steph Curry, ages well. So I'm not going to hold that against him. Although I think the fit may be an issue moving forward the older he gets now. If Milwaukee doesn't add ancillary pieces around him and Giannis the next 2-3 years, that may hurt in the end. But his production hasn't changed. He's still another player. I have to go with the, I guess, sort of obvious one. I'm going to go Anthony Davis. Because, again, he changed the narrative until this latest injury in Dallas. And now you have the situation now with Kyrie out. How long? We'll see. AD now in Dallas. He's now he's 31 currently right now. So next he has 2 more years, $54 million at next year, and then $58 million the year after. Okay, then a player option at age 34 at $62 million. Now, assuming Kyrie's back and whatnot, and things are okay, he does fit the timeline for the Mavericks. But the question is going to be, is he going to be available to play in a lot of those games? So I don't think it's a terrible contract because when he's like Embiid. When he's healthy, he's absolutely top 10 player in the league. But what are we getting? I mean, we don't know. And those numbers, if we see AD revert back to what he was before these last 2 years in LA, back to being hurt all the time, that's going to be a massive problem for the Mavericks. And that number makes it even worse. And we're still 3 years out. And I'll tell you right now, if that's a common thing for him going forward, he may opt in that contract on this player option.
Yeah, my concern would be the Kyrie injury. I mean, I would say the contract looks worse 2 weeks after Kyrie tears his ACL versus the day before he tears his ACL. Because, like, again, they were on a timeline of, okay, the next 3 years we're going to compete for a title. And now you might not have Kyrie for 3/4 of the year next year. If you might be looking at All-Star break. And let's face it, like, I don't know that Kyrie is going to be one who's going to like rush his rehab. It's not like he's going to like push himself to come back 2 months earlier. He's probably a guy who's going to err on the side of caution with it. So I would say the trade deadline, All-Star break is probably like a best case scenario. So now you have Anthony Davis and who else for the foreseeable future, assuming he can even stay healthy. So, yeah. I mean, like they are, yeah, I don't disagree with that pick at all, because given his age, given the money, given the lack of a system around him, the only thing I would say about that, and this is probably another podcast unto itself, is that like, given how good he is, there probably would be takers for him. I don't know that you'd get back as much as you'd like, given that they didn't get it.
For AD, you mean?
Yeah.
Does Dallas really have the gumption to blow it up after what they just did with Luka? That'd be I mean, brother, that'd be a bad look. No, you get rid of Luka for nothing, pretty much. Well, not say nothing, but you get rid of Luka for way less than you would have gotten on the market, right? Then you just give up on the AD thing. Oh boy, they will be riots in Dallas.
I'm not saying that they will do that. I'm just saying that like there's a world in which he's still desirable, whereas like a Jrue Holiday would be more like comparable to Chris Middleton. I mean, like I think that you could talk a contender into taking him. Like, would Phoenix swapped Durant for him, and you'd probably be talking multiple teams, but like if a desperate team like Phoenix looked at it and said, like, this is our way of trying to salvage not having to trade Booker, like, could you get desperate teams who are in contention or perceivable contention on their part to make that move? That's the only reason I'm saying that, like, it's still, I would say, a movable contract.
I can see Miami taking a flyer on him, maybe, but
Yeah.
then again, then he has to play center again, and I don't think he wants to do that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No. I mean, I'm not saying that they will. I would be shocked if they did, because how it would look would be horrific. But I'm just saying that, like, again, if you're isolating the player,
yeah,
his number, his skill set, would there be a market for him? I would say yes. But when you're factoring in all those other things, that's why it's a bad contract, because you know that Kyrie's going to be out a long time. He's probably going to miss time himself. You're on the hook for more than $50 million. So, like, I agree with you on all those things. I'm just saying that, like, there's a world in which you could probably move him.
yeah. If you're Dallas, you got to make this work. you got to lock him in, because it's a bad look to get rid of Luka, and then within a year, it's like, I'm going to trade AD now. You literally traded Luka for this guy. You give him the guy now. Now, unless you can get those picks, as much picks you can for Davis, which at this point, I don't think you can get more than a first rounder for him.
Yeah, I mean, you're probably looking at a max of 2, and I don't know that. And again, every pick is different. So I mean, like, again, a Knicks first rounder next year is not the same as, like,
Right.
having the Phoenix first rounder next year.
Right.
So, I mean,
Exactly.
like, Phoenix is going to wind up in the lottery most likely. I mean, barring something unforeseen, like,
Of
the
course.
worst that Phoenix will wind up with is like the 11th or 12th pick, whereas the Knicks will be picking like 22 or 23 at worst. So I mean, not all first round picks are created equal.
Right.
Uh, so I mean, like, yeah, if you're just talking about one good pick, they could probably get one good pick. They could probably get like a poo-poo platter of picks from teams that have protected picks, like lottery protected picks and all that sort of stuff. So
Right.
yeah, I mean, they're not all created equal, but yeah, I wouldn't see it. There's a huge market for him in terms of picks, given his age and injury history. So yeah, I
Right.
mean, they were banking with that deal that Kyrie Irving and him were going to play great together, and for a half they did. But I mean,
For a half.
they're two injury-prone players, and I know that in Kyrie's case, it's a freak injury,
Yeah.
but still, I mean, they bet on him when they made that deal, and they lost that bet.
Right.